Greetings, everyone. This is Samuel C. at Graph1159 on X, and I'm starting this YouTube channel to talk about the scriptures in more detail. But for my first video here, I want to talk about why I have decided to be apolitical. By apolitical, that doesn't mean that I will never comment on any topics related to politics, because basically every matter of life has some tie into politics. So it's unavoidable in that sense. But by apolitical, I mean that I'm not going to be voting for a particular political party or trying to steer people toward a particular political party. And to give you the background to see how I came to where I am now, I grew up in a conservative Christian background, and as a result, in my early adult years, I was in favor of the Republican Party because I saw the Republicans as supporting conservative Christian morality. Well, then in 2011, my theological transformation began. That is when first I came to believe in the salvation of all mankind through Christ. And then the next year is when I found the website of Martin Zender and other writers who are similar to the concordant publishing concern. And that's when I came to believe in the distinction between the two Gospels in the New Testament, the Gospel to Israel and Paul's Gospel to the Gentiles. And as a result of these theological developments, my politics started to evolve in a more libertarian direction. But I still, at this point, felt beholden to the Christian religion. And as a result of that, I still voted for Republican candidates, president, Congress, governor, in the elections of 2012 through 2020. Then we come to 2022, which was the year that I had a personal renaissance, so to speak, that God worked out in my life. And this was the year that I stopped self-identifying as a Christian. Now, if other people want to think of me as a Christian, that's perfectly fine. I have no objection to it. But I don't put that label on myself. And correspondingly, I came to think that it did not make sense to support the Republican Party because the Republican Party is the political arm of conservative Christianity. And for that matter, it did not make sense to support the Democratic Party either, because they are the political arm of progressive Christianity. But I don't identify with either type of Christianity. But what I came to favor in 2022 was the Libertarian Party, because my natural ideological orientation is to think that it's better to have smaller government, that in general, individuals and communities can figure things out better than the government can figure things out for them. And also, as a result of my theological developments, I had come to really focus on the fact that righteousness cannot come through law. And that's the Apostle Paul's teaching. And so I don't see it as the government's responsibility to enforce a certain type of morality for the sake of righteousness. And for that reason, I favor the government, especially the federal government, staying out of the culture wars. So I was comfortable with the Libertarian Party. Um, but then why am I now deciding to be apolitical? Well, recall what I said earlier, that the two major parties represent the two wings of the Christian religion, the conservative wing and the progressive wing. So, and the root problem in that is the Christian teaching of salvation by the use of one's free will to accept Christ. According to Christian doctrine, uh, Christ's death and resurrection cannot save you, cannot justify you, cannot reconcile you to God unless you use your will to accept Christ. And this, I believe, is where all of the other problems in conservative Christianity stem from. Uh, I think that the political problems ultimately stem from this. For progressive Christianity, their concept of salvation may be different. Instead of seeing salvation as some sort of individual thing, they might see salvation as a collective thing, but it still ultimately comes down to humans exercising their free will. Um, and now, where does the Libertarian Party come into this? Well, even though the party claims that they are neither left nor right, if you look at the different prominent libertarian voices on social media, if you look at the state affiliate parties, it's very clear that libertarians either have a conservative or a progressive bias. The difference is that the difference between libertarians and the major parties is that libertarians have a much smaller view of government, but the underlying spirituality ultimately breaks toward the conservative Christian or progressive Christian doctrine. And the analogy here would be, let's say, speaking in the spiritual realm, let's say that you have the standard issue doctrines of Christianity, whether the conservative or progressive variety. But instead of it being taught in a church where you have a leadership board and an overarching national denomination that the church is reporting to, instead of having all that hierarchy, you have people meeting to reinforce these doctrines to each other at somebody's house or in a coffee shop in a more informal way. Well, that's the analogy for what I think the Libertarian Party is. It is a decentralized ideology, but nevertheless one that, depending on which libertarian we're talking about, either has a conservative or progressive bias, and those biases are ultimately rooted, I believe, in the Christian religion. The United States is a predominantly Christian country, and so Christianity is inherently tied in to the politics. Now, I will say that in the religious sphere, if you have a group of people meeting um, in meeting informally to reinforce the Christian doctrines to each other, that is less harmful than institutionalized church, because at least you don't have the institutional harm on top of the doctrinal harm. But it still is not something that I want to be involved with. And likewise politically, I still think the Libertarian Party is the least harmful party if they were to be in power. But I don't see it as my calling to support them. I see it as my calling to trust in God, that, as Paul writes in Romans 13, the authorities are set by God, that the authorities are God's servant for our good, and being subject to the authorities is being subject to God's mandate. And even though, in a relative sense, the government can do things that are bad, ultimately only God knows what we have to experience in order to become what He's made us to be. And God is working through the government to carry that out. And so, and as I do my video series on the book of Romans, which will be my first series of videos, I'll talk about this more. But for now, thank you for watching, and I look forward to talking more about the scriptures with you.